On today's show, the Houston Rockets leave the West Coast empty-handed, 0-3, the most recent loss coming at the hands of the Golden State Warriors for the second time this season. But the bigger concern, the biggest issue, Jalen Green benched for the entire fourth quarter of that Rockets-Warriors game by Ime Udoka. Why was Jalen Green benched? We're going to unpack that. Plus, Alperen Sengun continues to dominate, and Jabari Smith Jr. steadily improving game by game. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh my, that's the no-look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari.
No! T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Ime Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Thank you for making the show part of your day every single day. A lot to get into on today's episode. The Rockets 121-116 loss against the Warriors. Their third loss, 0-3 on this recent West Coast swing, making me look like an idiot thinking that they could have gone 3-0, and then my gut was like, maybe they'll go 2-1, lose the Clippers game, and then they proved me wrong in a big way, losing all three games. Going to talk about some takeaways from this game, what we saw, and most importantly, right here from the jump, we're going to talk a little bit about Alperen Sengun continuing to dominate, putting up numbers that we haven't seen since Yao Ming was a Houston Rocket. Jabari Smith Jr. steadily improving game by game, especially on the defensive end. But number one, first and foremost, got to get into this thing with Jalen Green. Last episode, talking about his performance against the Lakers, he needs to be better, and that's one of the easiest ways to say it. Jalen just needs to be better. The onus is on him to be better, and he needs to be better. And clearly, what Jalen was doing on the floor wasn't good enough for Ime Udoka in this game against the Warriors. Now, I think that when you look at this, let's try and take a 10,000-foot view from this. First off, why did Jalen Green get benched for the entire fourth quarter? Ime's answer in the post-game interview when asked why Jalen Green stayed on the bench the entire fourth quarter was that he liked the group of guys that was out there. So very specifically, he liked having Aaron Holiday out there instead, because Aaron Holiday was the guy who absorbed what would have been the Jalen Green minutes. However, it also felt like he had a really short leash with Jalen throughout this game, because Jalen didn't get his usual substitution patterns. He was coming back in. He was checking back into the game later than he usually was. Ime was using Fred quite a bit more, some extended minutes for Fred VanVleet in this game. Fred playing 41 minutes total in this one. And it really felt like something was going on. Something was building where there was some frustration there maybe. And there was even a moment where Jalen had that insane turnover where he launched the ball into the fifth row, and the camera shot over to Ime, and you could tell he was just super visibly frustrated with Jalen in that moment. Now, I don't think this was a punishment of sorts necessarily, but at the same time, this was not a good game from Jalen Green. You might catch yourself and you might think, oh, well, look at he had 16 points and he was kind of coming alive there in the third quarter. That's when he started to kind of catch fire. So why would Ime bench him as soon as it looked like Jalen was actually kind of coming alive there in the quarter? Well, for a lot of reasons. First off, Jalen's defense was atrocious this game. It was really bad. There have been games where he's actually been really solid defensively this season. His awareness and his attention to detail, especially early in this game, was non-existent. I mean, the Warriors are a team that you cannot have mental lapses against the Warriors. You cannot be late on your coverages. You cannot have miscommunication in your switches. Any and all of that will lead to what we saw early in this game, which was Klay Thompson and Steph Curry lighting up the Rockets. And once those guys get going, it doesn't matter how damn good your defense is, they are still going to torch you. The Warriors lit the Rockets up to the tune of 21 of 43 from long distance, 48.8% from behind the three-point line. Steph had 5 triples, Klay had 5 triples, CP3 had 3 triples, Dario Saric got in on the action with 3 triples off the bench. It was an absolute masterclass in three-point shooting by the Warriors, and a big part of that was some of the defensive mistakes early in the game that led to Klay and Steph getting some wide-open looks, a large number of which Jalen Green was the lead culprit in either lagging behind on a screen or a miscommunication on a switch or just not paying attention as Klay was darting from one side of the court to the other. And if you are even a half second behind Klay Thompson, guess what? He's going to catch, he's going to shoot, and he's going to make it. We've seen this story time and time again if you're a Houston Rockets fan. And then later, when the Rockets actually cleaned up their defense and they started locking in on these guys, there was a play where Steph Curry, I forget if it was an ATO or if it was just like a regular play designed by the Warriors. I want to say it was an ATO. And Steph Curry comes off of a screen and Dillon Brooks shot the gap and was literally like, Dillon Brooks was like inside Steph Curry's jersey and Steph still drained the three-pointer. Like that, at some point, you know, if you let Steph and Klay get rolling, it doesn't matter how good the defense is. They're just going to be hot and they're going to torch you. You have to be good for the entire 48 minutes that you're playing against them. So Jalen's defense was wildly suspect in this game. And then on top of that, the offense was inconsistent again, where it just felt like he was forcing. It felt like he was taking ill-advised shots. You know, he was rushing some of his three-point attempts. Like there were points where he was trying to be aggressive, especially there in the second unit, which was something that we highlighted last episode, which was, hey, Jalen has to be aggressive when he's out there in the second unit, when he's running with, you know, Aaron Holiday and Jae'Sean Tate and Jeff Green and Tari, which there was no Tari this game, but you get my point. And he was trying to be aggressive with the second unit out there, but the quality of shots was just so poor. Like there was the process behind how he was getting to his shots was just really disappointing. It kind of feels like we're seeing him take some steps backwards as far as his development goes. I'm not trying to be overreactionary from one game, but this has been, you know, we're 12 games into the season so far, and I'm not saying that Jalen has to take this massive year 3 leap, but he should be better and further along, at least as a scorer right now, than what he is. And I think maybe there's some frustration there. I think Jalen probably is frustrated because he's got this new role, these new set of expectations. He's playing a very new, different way. The ball is now out of his hands. He's now the third option offensively behind Alperen Sengun and Fred VanVleet with the starters. And then he has to mentally shift from being the third option to being the number 1 option with the bench unit. So I get it. There's a steep learning curve here for Jalen to get accustomed to the way things need to be done. But at the same time, when you're making that many mistakes defensively and you can't put it together offensively either, you're becoming detrimental to the success of the team. And I think ultimately that's why Ime benched him in the fourth quarter. I want to know why you think Ime benched him in the fourth quarter, though. Let me know in the YouTube comments. Give me your thoughts on Ime benching Jalen Green. And I want to know how Jalen responds to this. Because just like Jabari not closing out the games when Jeff Green was in the lineup against the Pelicans, and then the following game against the Nuggets, Jabari took it in stride and he was like, no, it's a learning opportunity. I got to be better, right? I can learn from Jeff and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to have plenty of opportunities to close down the line. Let's see how Jalen takes this. Let's see how Jalen reacts to not just being benched for the closing moments of a close game, but being benched for the entirety of a fourth quarter, largely because of the mistakes that were made early in the game. So this is like a make or break year for Jalen Green. And we've said it before, we'll say it again. This was going to be adjusting to Ime's style, this new team identity, all that. This was going to be the toughest adjustment for Jalen Green specifically. So how does he respond to this? And how does Ime try to maybe better utilize Jalen going forward or put him in different positions to be successful going forward. It's going to be very interesting to watch this whole thing kind of develop over time over the rest of this season. But that's the big takeaway from this Rockets West Coast swing is Jalen's got to be better, man. He's got to be better for this team to be able to do what it wants to be able to do this season. Coming up, want to get into some of the actual game flow here, talk a little bit about how the Rockets came up just a little short against the Golden State Warriors. Again, 121-116 loss. Alperen Sengun continuing to dominate, putting up some insane numbers. And Jabari Smith Jr. stock steadily increasing over these last few games. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners over at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each and every week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Kyle Anderson, with Jaden McDaniels out for a week, Anderson should see a boost in his production to help fantasy managers all around. So want to check out Kyle Anderson. Santi Aldama, a little surprising, but Aldama has replaced Marcus Smart in the Grizzlies lineup and has thrived so far. So that's another pick you won't want to miss out on. And a good friend of the Houston Rockets, Eric Gordon.
Oh my.
With Bradley Beal still out for the Phoenix Suns, Gordon has been starting and putting up solid enough fantasy numbers. So like we said, Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship this season. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about players being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your car needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit on your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's get into a little bit of the game flow from this one. 121-116 loss, unfortunately, against the Golden State Warriors. And this was a game, I mentioned it early on, the three-point shooting. This Rockets team is not a team that's built to, A, shoot a lot of threes, and B, make a lot of threes. So when they go up against a team that is built to do both of those things, the math advantage is not on the Rockets' side. However, the advantage that was on their side in this game was the fact that they absolutely decimated the Warriors when it came to points in the paint, 56-18. That is an insane points in the paint advantage, plus 38 in the painted area for the Rockets. And that's why they were able to kind of stick in this game, despite the fact that the Warriors were an insane plus 8, plus 24 from the three-point line. So again, 48.8% three-point shooting by the Warriors to just 31.7 from your Houston Rockets, unfortunately. But again, they were kind of playing bully ball with the Warriors, and it was working. You saw Dillon Brooks at during stretches of this game doing his whole little, okay, if Steph Curry's going to guard him, if Chris Paul's going to guard him, all right, cool, throw the ball down low to him, let him go to work, let him get some shots right at the rim. And I absolutely love that the Rockets basically have little kind of, I don't want to call them counters necessarily, but just every player that's on the floor for the Rockets has a set or two or a play or two designed for them to take advantage of certain mismatches or to put them in spots where they can be really successful. And for Dillon Brooks, one of his areas of success is when a smaller player is guarding him, which happens a lot because for some reason teams haven't gotten the memo yet that the Rockets are going to take advantage of that if you put a smaller guy on Dillon Brooks or a bad defender on Dillon Brooks. And he's going to play bully ball with him and get him down in the post and get a good seal on him. And then either Fred or LP will find him with a quick pass, and he's able to just elevate right over the top or, a couple dribbles, back him down, get right to the rim and do that little sweeping hook shot that he has. And we saw him do that to Steph, to CP3 a couple times in this game. Liked what we saw out of Dillon. He was doing a hell of a job chasing guys around all over the perimeter, whether it was Klay Thompson, whether it was Steph Curry. It's unfortunate that there aren't two Dillon Brooks is out there, because, you know, the Rockets were unfortunate in some of their switches. And again, some of the defensive miscues by Jalen Green early in this game led to some of the shots that got guys going. Now, I will say, I am so thankful this West Coast trip is done, because in yet another game, there was a massive free throw disparity between what the Rockets shot and what their opponent shot. The Rockets got 19 free throw attempts. The Warriors got 33 free throw attempts. So I want to reiterate, the Rockets' points in the paint advantage, 56-18. So you're telling me that the team that scored 56 points in the paint to only 18 by the Warriors, and yet somehow the Warriors were the team that got 33 free throws? I need somebody somewhere to make that make sense, because the math still ain't mathing. It hasn't been mathing this whole West Coast road trip. So thank God that it's over. Thank God that they're going to be back in Houston for a couple games, back on their home court, back on their home turf. Not that it's, you know, inherently that much better, but just get away from the West Coast officials. Thank God. Alperen Sengun, who was first off, was questionable to play in this game, just like he was questionable to play against the Pelicans a few games ago, wound up still playing and wound up dominating. And it didn't start that way either. And I think one of the traits of good players are players that can find themselves over the course of a game, right? That don't let one quarter or one half of basketball dictate their entire evening. And for LP, he started out and he was struggling. He was missing a lot of shots that he would normally make, right? It felt like he was short on a couple of these shots. It felt like he was, you know, just not in his usual rhythm of hitting some of the looks that are normally, you know, easy makes for him offensively. And at one point in this game, I want to say like midway through the second quarter, he was 4 of 10 shooting from the floor, 40%, well below his insane efficiency that he normally has. And he finished the game with 30 points on 13 of 23 shooting. He was 2 of 3 from long distance, 2 of 5 at the charity stripe. He's got to clean up the free throws. That's the only bad part of his game in this one. He had 13 rebounds. He had 5 dimes. He had a steal. He had a block. He did have 3 turnovers, but for somebody that has the ball in his hands as much as he does, 2 to 3 turnovers a game is I think, fairly acceptable. The dude just knows how to play, and he's just good. And now that he has a point guard in Fred VanVleet to unlock his skills even further, I mean, this guy's going to average like 30, 12, and 7 one day in his prime, possibly. Like you see the formula there. His usage rate is slowly creeping up. The Rockets have completely leaned into Alp as their best player this season, and that's kind of their new team identity. Is Alp is their number one option offensively. He's their go-to bucket. All the offense runs through him, whether it's him in the post, whether it's him setting screens, whether it's DHOs with him on the perimeter. And the fact that he was able to put up these numbers, a stat line that we haven't seen since Yao Ming played for the Houston Rockets. And he did it while he was dealing with lower back issues as well. I kind of think that the reason he started the game off slow is he was probably still a little tight, a little stiff from the lower back issues that he was dealing with. And then as the game went along, he loosened up. And as he loosened up, he was like, all right, I'm back to normal. I bet he was sore as hell later that night or, you know, the following morning. I'm sure Alp woke up and was like, oh my God. I don't know what the words for, oh my God, my back are in Turkish, but I'm sure that's exactly what he was saying as he woke up, you know, the day after this game. But it was needed too, because Jalen was having an off game offensively until he kind of sort of started to wake up there in the third quarter. Fred VanVleet had an incredibly inefficient game offensively. He was 3 of 13 shooting the ball, only 10 points. But Fred did have 14 assists and 0 turnovers. So while you need Fred to be better and actually hit some of the shots that he's taking, just 1 of 8 from three-point land is brutal. The facilitating is next level. Like Fred is a top 5 playmaker or a top 5 facilitator in the league right now because the bread and butter pick and roll between him and Alperen Sengun, as well as just him identifying and finding other guys, whether it's Dillon, whether it's Jabari, even not this game specifically, but Jalen usually. Fred just knows how to be a table setter. And it's hard to say Fred had a bad game when you have 14 assists and 0 turnovers, but Fred does need to be better when it comes to just knocking down shots, because that's part of how the offense works for the Rockets is they collapse the paint with a lot of driving kick action, or they collapse the paint with Alperen Sengun attacking either out of the post or just facing up. And if you're not knocking down shots out of those offensive sets, then you're going to struggle to keep up with other teams. The Rockets throughout various stretches of this game had just complete offensive droughts where they couldn't get anything to fall offensively. There was like a lid on the basket. And Alp, when he's out there, can kind of be your go-to bucket and can get you a couple buckets here and there. But eventually it gets to a point where teams are sending double teams, or where he has to be able to have that kick-out option, and you have to have reliable shooters who can knock down those shots when it does happen. And the Rockets just go through too many waves, too many stretches where it feels like nobody can hit anything for this team. And that's why we're seeing them kind of, struggle to put up numbers offensively. Their defense has been consistent. Their defense has been their calling card, and they've been able to rely on their defense quite a bit through this, these first 12 games, but they've got to figure out something to do with their offense, whether it's just, going back to, some different sets for Alperen Sengun to get him going, or it's the minutes where he's off the floor that the offense kind of comes to a screeching halt, unfortunately. But we may, in this Warriors game, have gotten a brief look at Jabari Smith Jr. kind of tapping into that mid-post arsenal that he's had in the past, and maybe that's something that this Rockets team can further explore in these coming games down the line, because the Rockets need a little bit more diversity in their offense. They need some other guys who can give them some reliable, sustainable offense. Maybe that can be Jabari. We're going to talk about him coming up here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get in on the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins, and all you have to do is wager $5. It's that simple. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. Right now, you can take a look at the outright betting favorites for Super Bowl 58, the Philadelphia Eagles, plus 450 right there alongside them. The Kansas City Chiefs, or Kansas City Swifties, as I like to call them now, also plus 450 right behind them. You got the San Francisco 49ers at plus 480, Baltimore Ravens at plus 850, the Miami Dolphins at plus 900, and on the outside of the top 5 looking in, the Cowboys starting to slip a little bit further in the odds at plus 1200. They've also got spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. You've got to go check them out. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started this NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, I should have put this disclaimer a little bit earlier in the show, but shout out to the everydayers who make it all the way into the third segment. I'm late on this episode. I do apologize for that. I every so often, despite however well I'm managing it, sometimes my diabetes just gets the better of me. Shout out to all my type 1s out there, my type 1 diabetics who know how it is. You can be all on top of your numbers, checking your sugars, doing everything you're supposed to, and then just you have a day where it just kicks your butt, it goes haywire. And so Monday evening, after wrapping up the game on Rockets Watch, I just wasn't feeling super hot, and so I went to go, I just had a rough day. So I'm back in the saddle, doing good. But I want, this was important stuff that we had to talk about. So I apologize that the episode is late, but we're back here and we're talking about the important stuff going on with this Rockets team. So, and as always, I appreciate you guys for the support. Shout out to everybody whenever you guys reach out and say, hey, I hope you're feeling better. It does mean the world to me. All right. Jabari Smith Jr., whose stock is going up. The price is going up on Jabari Smith Jr. No, because look, Jabari has been like sneakily getting better and better and better each of these last few games. And I'm more impressed with his defensive performance over this West Coast swing than I was with his offense. But I also think this Warriors game was maybe the glimpse of that little offensive package that Jabari has that maybe Udoka and the Rockets can tap into a little bit more, especially with the second unit. But first I want to focus on the defense from Jabari, because we saw him in the Clippers game and in the Lakers game, and most recently now in the Warriors game, really stepping up his level of defense to where I'm talking like the closeouts are good. Like he talked about it the other day. And when I asked him about getting benched for Jeff Green, and he mentioned Jeff's attention to detail and what he's learning from him and all that. And we're starting to see some of that really take hold, because now you're seeing Jabari, when he's closing out on a guy on the three-point line, he's closing out hard. He's running guys off the three-point line. He's getting into his defensive stance when he's closing guys out. He's funneling the offensive player the right direction. He's switching well. He's switching with purpose. He was able to like clamp up Kawhi Leonard. He had some possessions against LeBron where he looked good. There's just something about Jabari. I don't know if it's just like something's finally started to click, where he's just, the game is slowing down for him defensively and he's understanding where he's supposed to be and how he's supposed to guard. And we're seeing him be a lot more physical on box outs too, where the rebounding numbers have been really encouraging, to where even if he's not the one that walks away with the board, you're seeing him down there like actually throwing a body on guys, fighting, boxing out, doing those little things that he has to do in his role for this team to succeed. And I don't know if he's buying in or what, but it's been such a welcome sight to see, where he's just slowly getting it. Like he's slowly turning into the defensive version of the player that we kind of thought he was going to be coming right out of college. And he's still got a long way to go. I'm not saying he's a perennial all-star right now, but it's just been an encouraging little stretch of like 3 or 4 games. Really, again, just really the West Coast road trip has been a really encouraging set of 3 games to just see those steps forward that Jabari Smith Jr. is taking. And then most recently in this Warriors game, the offensive production. Now, if you were to just go look at the box score, if you were just box score watching, you say, oh, he had 17 points. He was only 1 of 5 from 3. Okay, well, why are you so excited about those? Those aren't great numbers. He was 6 of 7 inside the arc. That is important. And that is something that can be built upon. Because to me, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, for Jabari, I do really feel like his bread and butter is that like turnaround, his little turnaround fadeaway when he posts up, or when he faces up in the little mid-post area, right? Kind of like free throw line extended, just get him the ball in the middle of the floor, triple threat where he can elevate or pump fake or do a jab step and drive, kind of like almost like the Carmelo Anthony spot of the floor, right? Just get him the ball and let him go to work like Melo. Ideally with more efficiency than that, but right, like that's kind of his spot, because nobody can guard Jabari when he decides to pull up from mid-range. I mean, he's basically 7 feet tall, and when he elevates, it's game over. Nobody's blocking that shot. It is almost the most unguardable move on this team, aside from Alperen Sengun deciding to just truck through defenders right at the rim with his craft and his bag and his array of skills. Like Jabari's midi jumper might be the second most unguardable move on this Rockets team. And I'd like to see the Rockets go to it a little bit more. It kind of feels like Jabari's role offensively has been a bit of an afterthought, and understandably so, because they've been prioritizing Alperen Sengun, which has been phenomenal. Fred VanVleet is going to get his, and the Fred VanVleet, Alperen Sengun 2-man game pick and roll inherently means that those 2 guys are going to kind of be options 1 and 2 offensively. Then Jalen kind of slots in at option 3, and Jalen also gets his reps with the second unit, trying to run that group, trying to, be the alpha in that group. But that kind of hasn't worked so far, right? Where Jalen has kind of shied away from the challenge of steering that second unit. So maybe it's time to give Jabari a chance, right? Let Jabari have some moments with that second unit where maybe you're running like Jeff Green and Jabari as your 4-5. So you get like actual 5-out spacing, and you just put Jabari in the middle of the floor right at the free throw line. Have Aaron Holiday or Jalen or somebody walk the ball up and just, run a quick little set to get Jabari the ball in the mid post, and then let him go to work. Because against the Warriors, they couldn't guard it. He looked unguardable inside the 3-point line against the Warriors. So I think there's something there that I'd like the Rockets to explore and get back to and do more of moving forward with Jabari. And again, maybe it's time. Maybe if Jalen isn't going to be able to figure this thing out, if Jalen isn't going to be able to figure out his offensive woes and get back to a place where he's at least consistent offensively, or not even just consistent offensively, just get back to who he is. He's a bucket. That's the thing that he's supposed to be able to do at the NBA level. He's supposed to score at will, and he's not doing that lately. And it's not a matter of just, shots aren't falling. It's like he's shying away from being who he is as a player. And maybe that's because of this adjustment period and him getting used to his new role and all that, but maybe he's in his own head a little bit. But until Jalen figures himself out, maybe they should give Jabari a deeper look as far as just an increased role or, increased usage offensively, at least situationally, because I do think that there's something there. And to tie a pretty little bow on this whole conversation, I don't want anybody walking away from this show thinking that I'm down on Jalen or that I want him traded or any of that. No, I still have the utmost belief that Jalen can figure this thing out. He's got a lot of talent and a sky-high potential, sky-high ceiling, but he's got to get it figured out. And the clock is ticking on him. And I will add one more note that I meant to share earlier, though, and it's kind of probably one of the biggest adjustments for him is one of the areas where Jalen found the most success in his first two seasons in the NBA was actually the two-man game with Alperen Sengun. And we've talked about these numbers before, but Alp has basically been tethered to Fred VanVleet, right? So Alp has only played like 30-something minutes without Fred VanVleet. Jabari Smith Jr. has only played like 40-something minutes without Fred VanVleet. Jalen has played like 90-something minutes without Fred. So of the three young guys, of the three premier young staples of this Rockets team, the three young starters, Jalen is the one who has the onus put on him to find success without the steadying, guiding hand of Fred VanVleet. And that's a lot to expect out of him. It is. And I get that. So I don't want it to seem like I'm being too harsh on him. I don't think the Rockets need to like abandon the experiment or anything. They just need to maybe find ways to have Jalen be able to find success in the way that Ime is utilizing him, or just change it up a little bit. I don't know. But they've got to find something. Like, maybe it's more opportunities for Jalen in the offense when Fred and Sengun are out there. Maybe you minimize how much, offense is going through Fred and Alpi, and you design some sets for Jalen to get some more, catch and shoot opportunities or opportunities, coming off motion where he can attack downhill, because when those guys are out there, there's a lot more gravity on the floor. Because when Jalen's playing with the second unit and he's got Jae'Sean Tate, who's not respected as a shooter, or he's playing with Jock Landale, or even at times defenders aren't honoring Jeff Green as a shooter. Like, sometimes teams are just packing the paint against Jalen with that second unit, and it's making life a little bit harder for him out there. Again, he has the hardest role out of Sengun, Jabari, and Jalen. He's got the hardest, or been dealt like the worst hand of cards, I guess, this season, because he's the one of the three young guys that has to go out there and try and essentially do it on his own, because Fred and Alpi have been tethered together, and even Jabari, to a lesser extent, has been tethered to Fred. So most of their minutes, they're on the court with Fred to have him lead the charge. But that's the role that Jalen has to be able to succeed in as the secondary ball handler for this team, especially in the absence of Ime Thompson. Now, once Ime Thompson gets back from injury, which hopefully we get an update on that, an official update soon. Once Ime Thompson gets back from injury, it'll hopefully look a lot better. Because then that'll take some of the pressure off Jalen in the second unit. He'll have another ball handler out there, another creator. Hopefully Ime has been able to study a little bit more and get to a place where he's more comfortable and looks a little bit further along than he did in his first few games, looking at film, studying, working on stuff while he's been rehabbing, that kind of thing. But yeah, sorry, I felt like I got up on a soapbox there for a moment, but that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, I appreciate you and thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I want your thoughts on why Jalen was benched by Udoka. I want your thoughts on everything from this episode. What do you think is going on with Jalen Green? Do you agree or disagree with some of what I said in today's show? Let me know in the YouTube comments. I do read each and every one of those every single day. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.